Welcome to Nightmare Narratives, where every story is a journey into darkness. Prepare to be haunted by tales that will linger long after the lights go out. I've always been curious about the unknown, that mix of excitement and fear. So, when I found an Airbnb listing for a remote cottage in the countryside, I couldn't resist. It promised peace and quiet away from the city's hustle and bustle. Just what I needed, or so I thought. The cottage looked cute in a rustic way, with ivy climbing up its stone walls and a small garden out front. But as evening came, the place felt eerily still. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just my imagination. After all, wasn't this the adventure I wanted? The first night was uneventful, just the usual creaks of an old house. But on the second night, things got weird. I was woken up by a loud thump from the attic. My heart was pounding as I lay there, listening. Another thump, then a dragging sound. Gathering my courage, I grabbed a flashlight and headed up to the attic. The attic was dusty and full of old stuff. As I looked around, my flashlight caught something creepy. A set of fresh footprints in the dust, leading to an old locked trunk. Fear and curiosity battled inside me, but I had to know what was in the trunk. With shaky hands, I forced the lock open. Inside were old photos, letters, and a worn journal. The photos showed a young woman in front of the cottage. The letters talked about a forbidden love, a tragic end, and a restless spirit. The journal belonged to the woman in the photos. Her last entry was about a malevolent presence that drove her mad. As I read, I felt a cold breath on my neck. I spun around but saw nothing. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive. Suddenly, it got freezing cold, and I could see my breath. The attic door slammed shut, trapping me inside. Panic surged as I pounded on the door, yelling for help. In the silence, I heard a soft whisper. "Leave. Now." My flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows. In the brief moments of darkness, I saw her, a ghostly figure with sad, hollow eyes. She reached out, her touch icy cold. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. Desperate, I kicked the door open and bolted down the stairs. I didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping for air. The cottage loomed behind me, dark and menacing. I jumped into my car and sped away, never looking back. Even now, I can't explain what happened in that cottage. The allure of the unknown, once so tempting, now reminds me of the darkness that can hide in unexpected places. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some places are best left undiscovered. I had always loved traveling alone. There's something freeing about it. No schedules, no compromises, just you and the open road. This time I found a remote Airbnb that looked perfect for a quiet getaway. It was an old house in the countryside, far from the noise of the city. When I arrived, the house seemed charming in a spooky sort of way. It had a weathered look, with ivy crawling up the stone walls and tall trees surrounding it. The host wasn't there to greet me, but they had left a key under the mat. As I stepped inside, I noticed the place was well kept, but had an eerie, old-fashioned feel to it. The first night was quiet, and I slept soundly. But the next morning, things started to feel off. As I went to brush my teeth, I saw a message written on the bathroom mirror in the steam. "Leave now." My heart raced. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank or a leftover message from the previous guest. But it still unsettled me. Throughout the day, I noticed more strange things. My phone charger moved from the bedside table to the living room. A book I had left on the coffee table was now on the kitchen counter. I was starting to feel like I wasn't alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak and groan of the old house sounded like footsteps. Around midnight, I heard a soft whispering coming from the hallway. Gathering my courage, I stepped out of the bedroom. The whispering stopped, but as I turned to go back, I saw another message on the mirror in the hallway. "You shouldn't be here." Fear gripped me. I decided to search the house, hoping to find some explanation. In the attic, I stumbled upon an old chest filled with dusty papers and photographs. As I sifted through them, a chilling story began to unfold. The house had once belonged to a man named Harold, who was rumored to be cruel and controlling. He had mysteriously disappeared years ago, and the house had been abandoned until recently. One of the old letters I found was from a woman named Emily, begging for help. She wrote about being trapped in the house and how Harold wouldn't let her leave. The last letter ended abruptly, as if she had been interrupted. Suddenly I felt a cold breeze and the door slammed shut behind me. Panic set in as I struggled to open it. The whispering started again, louder this time, filling the room with an oppressive presence. "Get out!" it hissed. With all my strength, I managed to force the door open and fled downstairs. I grabbed my keys and ran to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drove away, I glanced back at the house and saw a shadowy figure standing in the window, watching me leave. I never looked back, and I never traveled alone to a remote place again. The experience left me shaken, a reminder that some places have dark histories best left undisturbed. What started as a solo adventure turned into a nightmare, and the allure of isolation now carries a different, more sinister meaning for me. We were excited about our family vacation at Ravenwood Manor. The Airbnb listing described it as a charming, historic manor in the countryside, perfect for a peaceful getaway. The photos showed a grand old house with beautiful gardens, and we couldn't wait to experience it. When we arrived, the manor looked just as impressive as in the pictures. It was huge, with ivy-covered walls and tall old windows. The host had left the keys in a lockbox by the door, along with a friendly note welcoming us to enjoy our stay. The first couple of days were great. We explored the gardens, relaxed in the spacious living room, and enjoyed the peace and quiet. But on the third night, things started to get strange. It began with small things. Faint whispers in empty rooms and cold spots that sent shivers down our spines. My daughter, Lily, was the first to notice. "Mom, I keep hearing someone whispering in my room," she said, her eyes wide with fear. I tried to reassure her, thinking it was just her imagination. But then we all started hearing the whispers. They seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, soft but unsettling. At night, I would wake up feeling like someone was watching me. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and cold drafts would sweep through the house even though all the windows were closed. One evening, as we were gathered in the living room, the lights flickered, and we saw a faint, ghostly figure standing at the top of the stairs. It was a woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her face pale and sad. She vanished as quickly as she had appeared, leaving us all shaken. Determined to understand what was happening, we started looking into the history of Ravenwood Manor. We found an old journal in the library that belonged to a woman named Margaret. Her entries told a tragic story of love and loss. Margaret had fallen in love with a man named Thomas, but their relationship was doomed. Thomas died under mysterious circumstances, and Margaret, heartbroken and alone, took her own life. As we read her words, the temperature in the room dropped, and we heard a sorrowful wail echoing through the house. We realized that Margaret's spirit, along with others, was still trapped in the manor, reliving their pain and sorrow. Things escalated quickly. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut, and we heard angry voices arguing late at night. It was clear that the spirits were not just sad, but angry and potentially dangerous. One night, we decided we couldn't stay any longer. As we packed our bags, the ghostly apparitions became more frequent and aggressive. We saw Margaret's spirit again, this time with a look of desperation and rage. "Leave!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the halls. We didn't need any more encouragement. We grabbed our things and ran to the car. As we drove away, I looked back and saw the figures of Margaret and Thomas standing in the doorway, watching us leave. We never returned to Ravenwood Manor. The experience left us shaken and haunted, a stark reminder that some places are best left undisturbed. The tragic history of the manor was too powerful, and the spirits within too restless. Our family was excited about spending a weekend at Willowbrook Cottage, a charming Airbnb nestled in a remote part of the countryside. The listing described it as a perfect getaway with scenic views, cozy interiors, and plenty of space for our kids, Emma and Jake, to explore. We arrived just as the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the picturesque cottage. It looked exactly like the photos, quaint, with flower boxes under the windows and a wooden porch swing. The host had left the key in a lockbox with a note. "Welcome to Willowbrook Cottage. Enjoy your stay." The first evening was perfect. We unpacked, cooked a big family dinner, and enjoyed the peace and quiet of the countryside. The kids loved the wide open space and the adventure of exploring a new place. As night fell, we settled into the cozy living room with a roaring fire and a game of Scrabble. The first hint of something strange happened around midnight. Emma, our youngest, woke up crying, saying she heard someone whispering her name. "It's just a bad dream, sweetheart," I said, hugging her tightly. But deep down, I felt a twinge of unease. The next day was bright and sunny, and we spent most of it outside, hiking and playing games. By the time evening came, we were all exhausted. We decided to have an early night. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the wooden floorboards. My heart pounded as I listened carefully. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, moving from room to room. I nudged Mark awake. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. He sat up, listening intently. The footsteps stopped right outside our bedroom door. Mark got up, opened the door, and found nothing. The hallway was empty. We both went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, things got even stranger. Objects had moved during the night. A chair from the kitchen table was now in the hallway. The kids' toys were scattered across the living room, even though we had tidied up before bed. Mark tried to stay calm, but I could see the worry in his eyes. That night, we all slept in the same room, hoping it would make us feel safer. But the disturbances continued. We heard whispers, soft but clear, calling our names. The air felt heavy and cold, and shadows seemed to dance on the walls. Emma screamed in the middle of the night, saying she saw a woman standing at the foot of her bed. Desperate for answers, we started searching the cottage for clues. In the attic, we found an old diary hidden under a loose floorboard. It belonged to a woman named Eliza, who had lived in the cottage many years ago. Her diary entries grew more and more frantic, describing a presence that haunted her, whispering her name and moving objects around the house. Her last entry was chilling. I can't take it anymore. She won't leave me alone. Realizing we were not alone, we decided to leave immediately. We packed our bags in a hurry and got into the car. As we drove away, the cottage seemed to loom over us, its dark windows like eyes watching us leave. We never spoke of Willowbrook Cottage again. The experience left us deeply unsettled, a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed. What was meant to be a peaceful retreat turned into a terrifying encounter with the unknown, and we learned that some secrets are better left buried. As a solo traveler, I was always on the lookout for unique and off-the-beaten-path accommodations. So, when I found an Airbnb listing for a charming old townhouse in a quiet, historic district, I couldn't resist. The photos showed a beautiful 3-story building with vintage decor and a cozy atmosphere. The host had rave reviews, and the location seemed perfect for exploring the city. I arrived late in the afternoon, greeted by the warm glow of street lights reflecting off the cobblestone streets. The townhouse stood tall and welcoming, with ivy climbing its brick walls and large windows framed by shutters. The host had left the key under the mat and a welcoming note on the table inside. "Make yourself at home. Enjoy your stay." The first evening was delightful. I explored the nearby streets, had dinner at a quaint little cafe, and returned to the townhouse feeling excited about the days ahead. The place had a nostalgic charm, with its antique furniture and cozy nooks. I settled in, read a book, and then went to bed, looking forward to a restful night. But sleep didn't come easily. Around midnight, I heard faint footsteps coming from the floor above. I remembered the listing mentioned the townhouse was a single unit, so no one else should have been there. I brushed it off as old house noises and tried to sleep. The next morning, I was out all day, visiting museums and enjoying the local sights. By the time I returned, it was getting dark. I made myself a light dinner and settled in to watch a movie. As I sat on the couch, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. That night, the noises were louder. Footsteps moved from room to room upstairs, accompanied by soft murmurs that sounded like a conversation just out of earshot. My heart raced as I lay in bed, straining to hear. Suddenly there was a loud thud, as if something heavy had been dropped. I jumped up and grabbed my phone, using its flashlight to check the rooms upstairs. There was nothing out of place, but the air felt colder, and a sense of unease hung over me. I went back to bed, leaving the lights on, and eventually fell into a restless sleep. The following day, I decided to ask the host about the noises. I sent a polite message, mentioning the sounds I had heard. The reply came quickly. "I've never experienced anything like that, but the townhouse is old. Maybe it's just settling noises." That evening, as I prepared for bed, the atmosphere in the townhouse felt different, heavier, almost oppressive. I double-checked that all the doors and windows were locked, then settled in with my book, hoping for a distraction. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the room plunged into darkness. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my phone. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and I noticed something strange. The temperature had dropped significantly, and I could see my breath. Then I saw it. A shadowy figure standing at the top of the stairs, watching me. My blood ran cold as I realized this was no figment of my imagination. The figure seemed to dissolve into the darkness as I stared, paralyzed with fear. I knew I couldn't stay another night. I packed my things in a hurry, constantly glancing over my shoulder. expecting the figure to reappear. As I left the townhouse, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. The streets outside felt oddly comforting despite the late hour. Later I learned from locals that the townhouse had a dark history. It had once belonged to a reclusive old woman who was rumored to have practiced dark rituals. She vanished mysteriously, and strange occurrences had been reported by several subsequent tenants. Some claimed the place was haunted by her restless spirit, still performing her rituals in the dead of night. My solo adventure had turned into a nightmare. I left the town the next morning, vowing to be more cautious with my Airbnb choices. The experience left me deeply shaken, a reminder that some places carry more than just history. They carry the echoes of those who once lived there. What started as a charming getaway became a haunting encounter with the unseen, teaching me that some stories are too eerie to forget. Section 5. Sweet Dreams. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of Airbnb horror stories. Sleep tight and sweet dreams, unless you dare to open your mind to the possibility that you may not be alone.